Look at that impatient face you have right now. He looks like a toddler. This is the toddler face. Look at it's true.
You know what?
I've seen that
I'm going
face.
to keep that on the intro of the episode just so people can hear how mean you are.
But it's serious. Look at your face. You're so impatient. You're like, let's go already. Let's hurry up and get to the next one.
Okay, so it's your turn. It's your turn to say hey.
When you open the door for somebody else.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Vaccine Conversation with Melissa and Dr. Bob. This is our podcast on informed consent, medical freedom, medical choice, and all things vaccine related. Okay. We talk about the infectious diseases. We talk about the vaccines, safety, efficacy. It's all here. It's all now. The Vaccine Conversation. And over to you, Dr. Bob.
I don't even know what to say after that.
I'm sorry. That was our narrator, everyone. I just wanted
that
was our narrator doing the overdubbing.
Oh, wow.
And back to our live programming.
Well, we like to have fun. We try to have fun because, these sometimes can be very boring conversations.
By we, he means me. Yeah. He means me. In the we here, the one having fun is me. I'm attempting.
Yes.
It's a lot of information to take in.
Yeah, so I promised I would keep all numbers and statistics out of part 2 of the flu debate.
Numbers and statistics, we love them. We love them, and they contribute. But sometimes we just want to have a conversation about this. And I think it's overwhelming for a lot of people, and that's why you guys are tuning in. You want to find a digestible version of the vaccine debate and all the different subtopics that go along with it, which, by the way, there are many. We've already had several podcasts that cover different topics. We have several in the works. Because there are so many parts. This is not a black and white issue. And this is it's really broad. It covers so many things, social things, obviously physical things, financial things. There are so many elements, advertising in the media, so many elements to this. We want to really talk about them all because they're all interesting. And this is what we all face on a day-to-day basis out in our lives, talking to our neighbors, talking to our coworkers, talking to family members. This isn't really just about statistics, and we can't always have my study and your study. And I get into so many of these conversations online where somebody will be like, where are your peer-reviewed studies about this? And you can go back and forth with peer-reviewed studies and it goes nowhere. It becomes link sharing that nobody goes to read. It doesn't make any headway. The only thing that makes headway is really learning to talk to people, person to person, and understand that there is humanity underneath all of this. And we have to understand that there are two sides for a reason. And unfortunately, I'd say unfortunately, there are two sides to this flu debate and the larger vaccine debate for an unfortunate reason that some people are hurt by vaccines. Some people experience side effects. Some people have issues with the vaccine safety, and they're the victims of that. So there's a group of people that are fighting for this here, not out of choice, but because they have to be. And so unfortunately, there are two sides, and it's very polarizing, and it's very one-sided when it comes to the media. So what we're going to talk about today, you didn't think I was going to bring it around again, did you? I could see both of your faces. You didn't think I was going to come back around to our topic, but I did, and the topic is the flu debate, not the flu as in influenza, the disease, and the vaccine. We will have another episode that talks about that. This is the flu debate, and this is part 2 because we already covered many of the standard things in part 1. Do you want to quickly summarize what we talked about in part 1 so they know what to go back to?
Let's see. Where's my paper? Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, just 30 seconds. We basically talked about how many people die of the flu every year in the U.S., what really is the flu risk, and how those statistics are very well overblown compared to what the real data show.
Extremely exaggerated.
Right. Real data show about 1,000 Americans die from the flu every year in the United States. We talked about how the vaccine is now recommended for every single human in America as long as you're 6 months and older. We talked about the review research that tries to look at exactly how effective the flu vaccines are in the elderly and healthy adults and pregnant women and in children. And how that flu vaccine, it does seem to maybe work some in maybe lowering your risk of catching and maybe feeling sick from the flu, but but it's the efficacy is very low compared to most standard vaccines. And we touched briefly on vaccine side effects and the statistics on how many people actually are harmed by the flu vaccine every year. So if you haven't listened to episode 1, go back
and we will, just so people know, because I know this is a huge, probably the number one thing I hear about, talking about vaccine safety. We will absolutely get into that. We're going to go into that. It'll take several episodes to really cover vaccine ingredients and to cover the safety of it. So we're not going to talk about that today, but we will get there. Don't worry. All these things we're going to be covering. And make sure to check out our Immunity Education Group Facebook page, where when we post these, you're going to be able to add your feedback, give some questions, things you want to hear related to these topics or unrelated you want to hear on future episodes. We definitely want to work with the listeners and make sure we're communicating with you guys, and we appreciate you listening. And we also have a website, immunityeducationgroup.org, so check that out as well. But on to the flu debate.
Yes.
Part 2. First of all, why is there a part 2? Why do we need to have a part 2? I mean, really, there could be probably a couple other parts, but what's the other side of the flu debate? We briefly touched on it in the first one. But outside of just the vaccine, who uses it, how it works, blah, 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 what's bigger than that? What seems to be brewing here that seems like bigger than that, would you say?
I mean, it's really the push to get the flu shot, the pressure, the media, the medical organizations, your employers.
So we would agree this vaccine is the most advertised,
right?
The most pushed, the most advised, but in a way that makes you feel like if you don't do this, you're under some serious risk. And you see it. This is the only one you really see places, like when you go to your drugstore, you go to, like I mentioned, Costco before. Yep. You go places, there are advertisements for getting your flu shot and receiving a 20% off coupon of your entire order if you get it there. Or there are incentives given to people to go ahead and get their flu vaccine. This is really the only vaccine I've seen that does that. I do see also pneumococcal for older ones coming into the picture, as well as the zoster, because it's all for older people. But really the flu vaccine, this is the one that you see advertised, you hear advertised all the time. And ironically, it's the one with like the lowest efficacy of any of the main vaccines, which may work hand in hand. I mean, you have a low efficacy, you have low public confidence.
Right.
And wouldn't you say most people feel the least confident about the flu vaccine? We mentioned that in the last episode.
Right. Well, because we know it's the one that has the lowest efficacy.
And people do get sick a lot. I hear people all the time, I got the vaccine and I got sick. It was the only time I got so sick.
But again, you hit on this, and I think it's a really important point. It seems to be one of the vaccines that causes put so much blame on people when you decide you don't want to get the flu shot.
But it's the most logical choice if you were going to opt out of something.
Right, if you're going to opt out of one.
This seems like the one you'd opt out of: low efficacy, high risk, or potentially high risk.
And probably at least half of Americans don't get a flu shot.
Right.
So I mean, what's the debate?
It's about 45%.
If half people do, half the people don't. I feel like I'm afraid to tell people in a crowd that I don't get the flu shot. Like I'm going to be the only one there. Whereas in the reality is I'm probably a group of, half the people that are there that didn't get the flu shot.
And I mentioned that we were talking about this before we were rolling, but when you were a kid, did you think about getting the flu vaccine as an older kid, as a young adult?
No,
I mean, did it cross your mind to get a flu vaccine? Did you start to feel pressured as you got older? As you became your 20s, your 30s, did you start feeling the societal pressure of like, ooh, maybe I need to start getting it now? Even though there's nothing really different with any of those other years, did you feel that yourself?
Oh, I didn't myself. I did professionally. In
to
hospitals,
actually get the vaccine,
right, where hospitals mandate it, and so I definitely felt some professional pressure, but I don't know. I think in the circles I walked in, I didn't feel a lot of pressure from society,
because probably the alternative was immune system strength, which we always talk about as being your answer to not having a problem with the flu. But most people feel the pressure.
Right.
I'd say most people feel that pressure. They feel that pressure in their workplace, not just as a health practitioner who's in their workplace and is mandated, but in their workplace, like as in they're offering, my husband mentioned at their work, they offer flu shots. They're coming today to your office to give you guys flu shots, which of course seems a little medically unsound because God forbid your
in
medical
an office.
history.
Right. What if you're allergic to eggs and you didn't know it?
What if you didn't know and
you're gonna die right there
of course the
egg
person
allergy.
giving you the vaccine is not the one who knows your medical history. Probably the last place that you should be getting it, along with all the other places where they don't know your medical history and there's no background done. It's just show up and do it. And I've seen silly things like to encourage kids, like there's this new like vibrating thing that you're supposed to put on your arm so that you don't feel it. And they're trying to make it go viral so that everybody thinks, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Or, oh, we'll offer popsicles and flu shots. And it's like they're making it into these super, what's the word I'm looking for? Like they're branding it into these fun and very orchestrated events to create interest.
You're right. You're
Public
right.
interest.
Orchestrated is a good word. And I would say there's kind of like this unspoken idea that the flu shot is going to prevent you from spreading the flu as well.
Well, that's a
And I
big
think
part
that's the big push. Is not only is it going to protect you, you're not going to spread it to your coworker. You're not going to spread it to your neighbor.
Well, that's not just
child.
That's the obligation that they're saying is yours. So in these media reports, when they admit the efficacy isn't great, they'll say, but you still need to get it because you need to protect those in the community who are unable to get it. So even though it doesn't work that well, you're still supposed to get it because of your community responsibility.
And it doesn't work that way at all.
Right. But what you're saying is even if you do that, you're actually not going to prevent spreading it to the immunocompromised child you thought you were protecting. And that's a crucial point, I think.
Yeah.
But so why do we need to advertise? Why is it advertised and that it always talks about the flu? It's safe and effective. Just like anything, the media sound bites come in, even though they do tend to later on in the article admit, it might not be working so well, but get it anyway. And something I've been interested in knowing, I don't know if you know the answer to this, maybe Matt does, is there a kickback at places like stores, like CVS? Is there a kickback at CVS for them selling a certain number of flu shots because they're taking 20% off of your total? So they're losing money. So they have to be making money. Nobody does that just out of the goodness of their hearts. They are losing money. So somewhere they need to be making money on the process. And it seems with so much advertising, there would be some kind of financial incentive to the people giving flu shots. And that's something I would really like to find out, or I'm curious to know. Which to me seems like an ethical breach.
Yeah.
Because the concept of a medical intervention is this is something that you're doing for safety. It's something you're doing out of the good of your hearts because you're trying to keep people safe. But when you have so much money involved, the amount of money they put into advertising, just imagine if they took those tens of millions of dollars and put it into real vaccine safety research that was really comparing things like fully, vaccinated versus completely unvaccinated. The money that people can't seem to find for the things we need on vaccine safety, what if they took that out of advertising and actually put it into that? Like, it seems like an ethical breach to me that they're spending so much money to get people to get the flu vaccine for something that doesn't even work that well, that the public is not that confident in, which is why they have to advertise it.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I've never even really tried to think through these things. It's fascinating now that you mention it, but I don't know. I think it really all comes down to the fact that they make more flu vaccines than any other vaccine on the planet. Mm-hmm. So many more. They only have to make like 5 million vaccines every year of one kind and maybe 20 million of another kind.
And this one's 150 million.
Right. They make 150 million or more.
Half of the U.S. population.
Every single year.
Right.
Yeah. And I think bottom line is that's probably the biggest reason why there's so much advertising is these have a shelf life. It's not like you can make them this year and then give them in the next year's flu season. Is that they have to sell them all this year, and there's a time limit.
So speaking of time limit and running out of things, just kind of
about how long this podcast is, or
no,
what?
Not time limit for this.
You're going to something
time
else.
limit for vaccines and how long they stay effective, or how to prevent vaccine spoilage. Going to jumping to the pregnancy and the flu thing, which again, we're going to cover pregnancy and vaccines because I get that question all of the time. I'm pregnant and my OB says it's time to get my flu vaccine. should I, shouldn't I get it? What have your experiences been? We'll do a whole thing on that because I think there's a lot to cover, a lot of studies to cover in that. But as it relates to, we talked briefly about thimerosal-free versus traditional flu shots and how pregnant women and young children are encouraged to get thimerosal-free if they're aware of it and if their doctor recommends it. But in California, we have kind of a special circumstance here because is it 8 of the last 10 years, I believe, that they have claimed gone to the legislature and claimed there is a shortage of thimerosal-free, and therefore we need to start giving the ones with thimerosal even to pregnant women and to young children.
Well, just to step back, is there is a California law that prohibits doctors from giving mercury-containing flu shots to infants and pregnant women. It's against the law.
I don't think people know that. Like, I definitely don't think people know that.
Some other states have this law as well. California does. Every year, not every year, but almost every year, we run out of mercury-free flu shots. And come January, February, the only thing that's left is flu shots that do have mercury.
But this happens so frequently, you think they'd start overestimating. That's what you would do, right?
Right. So when that happens, the California governor declares a state of emergency with the flu. They say the flu is so bad this year, it's a state of emergency. That allows doctors to not have to listen to that California law. The governor puts a stay on that law, so that law becomes temporarily on hold. So then doctors can then give mercury-containing flu shots to infants and pregnant women.
And this is important because somebody listening to this might not know that they could have been given a vaccine with mercury in it that they thought was...
But the question is mercury safe to inject into unborn babies, or is it not? If it's not safe, then, I mean, if it's safe to inject, why did they even pass a law prohibiting it? If it's not safe, which I believe is not safe, that's why they made the law, so they could all feel better about keeping these patients safe.
Yeah.
But so what's so dangerous and deadly about the flu that makes you would rather inject mercury into a pregnant woman?
Yeah,
which is neurotoxic in a pregnant woman or a developing baby.
Fetus,
What is so terribly dangerous about the flu that you'd rather do that than risk the flu season without the flu shot?
I want to say, too, the reason there even is the thimerosal-free vaccine for flu vaccine is because of all of the work people like us that are questioning vaccine safety. For years, way before us, were fighting for safe vaccines. When they started to see negative side effects, vaccines that contain thimerosal, they started to take them out beginning of the year 2000, right? In a slow process, taking them out. The reason we even have a thimerosal-free vaccine as an option for some people, because not all, obviously, but the reason that they have that version is because of people questioning what everybody else said was totally safe and effective. Like, here we are, we have a podcast. We're talking about things that are controversial, and they're controversial because they do not go along with the mainstream viewpoint that vaccines are always safe, they are always effective, and there are never reactions. And we are questioning things we know to be true based on thousands upon thousands of actual people, patients, other mothers, fathers, children that have had reactions. We know that it's not safe all the time for all people. We know that. So people have been fighting for decades about this. They've been fighting for safe vaccines for decades. Finally, in the late 1990s, they started to realize there was an uproar about this. And I can't stand it when I hear an interview where somebody who is defending pharmaceutical companies says they voluntarily chose to just go ahead and change the vaccine to be thimerosal-free, not because there was any risk, but just because parents were a little concerned and they just wanted to tend to that concern. Because when we're talking about the millions of dollars it takes to reformulate something, trust me, nobody is losing that kind of money without knowing that there is validity behind the parental concerns. They're not just going to do it because we're upset. Because guess what? We've been upset for the decades after, and they're not just doing anything about that. Like, we were upset about 277, but that's still passed. Like, us being upset is not the problem. The problem is they knew there was a real risk there. And because people made a loud enough noise, because people chose to be isolated and chose to raise their concerns, they made a version that is safer, that people enjoy that benefit today because of what happened, a decade ago, almost 2 decades ago. My God. And I want to point that out because that's exactly what we're doing. People that bring attention to vaccine safety want people to be more protected. And it turns out all the information you're getting is not all of the information. And so that's important for people to understand that now we've got these 2 different flu vaccines because of people caring so much about vaccine safety and because of the CDC agreeing there was a risk there with thimerosal. But yet, thimerosal is still in most of the vaccines people will get if they don't request thimerosal free, and it's still being given to pregnant women and young children once our state declares a state of emergency, and they override the law, a law that was put into place to keep people safer. And yet, that's not what's happening. And I don't think people understand. I think they assume there's no mercury in vaccines anymore, so I'm not getting any. Unless you go to your doctor and you watch them take out a single vial syringe, there's a single, you know that you're getting thimerosal free. And most people don't think like that. And most people aren't even aware that that's an option.
I know. And then there's some sort of like magic about vaccines that makes them 100% safe somehow. And that if you're a pregnant woman,
it's magical.
You're not even going to take Tylenol. You're not even going to take anything. Nothing goes into your body unless your doctor said it was okay. You did some research about it. And a lot of people are raising their young babies.
Don't have sushi. Don't have all these things that are commonplace.
Don't have mercury fish.
Yeah, you don't want to have.
And then, gosh, you want to raise your baby naturally. You're not going to give your baby, medications and food colorings and GMOs and all these artificial things. Yet you as a pregnant mom won't even think twice about injecting mercury into yourself when you're pregnant.
Because you might not know.
You're right. I think it's for most people it's because they don't know.
They don't know.
And if they knew, they would say, what the heck?
Or another word.
Right.
They might say another
expletive. And I think doctors also operate under the assumption that because there's a policy that it's okay, it's got to be okay.
But if it was okay, why are there 2 versions, like you're saying?
Right, why are 2 versions? Why is there a law?
If thimerosal is totally safe, why? It's not just to make people feel better about it. It's just not. Like, anybody who understands business, you do not lose that kind of money to reformulate something just based on an unfounded theory that there was a risk there.
Right.
We know mercury is neurotoxic. We know there is a risk to that, to be injected. And there's a huge argument going on between injected and ingested. And we'll talk about that too. That's a whole separate thing.
But because it's in a vaccine, it's okay.
But again, somehow...
There's that misconception that a vaccine makes it all okay because
somehow
it's
different than other medicines.
Right.
Other medicines can cause side effects. Of course they can. People get side effects from their blood pressure medication or their antidepressants. That's understandable. But for vaccines, for some reason, and I know the reason is not some reason, it's because that is subliminally pushed at you everywhere. Vaccines are safe, vaccines are effective, vaccines are safe, vaccines are effective. It's everywhere. And so you kind of, I think, subconsciously believe it without even knowing that you came to that belief system. It has been formulated for you. And so like that, advertising is another example of where they show the normalcy of pushing the flu vaccine. So I mentioned on the other episode that I went to Costco and the girl checking the cards. I mean, it was so weird for me to see a grown woman. She had to be in her 50s. And it seemed so below her to be standing with a wooden sign around her neck as a walking advertisement for the pharmaceutical companies who are wanting people to get the vaccine. And I mean, it seemed like they are just making people go so low at to advertise for them. I mean, she's not getting any kickback on this. So, it's not like she's benefiting somehow. And yet they've normalized this type of advertising. Right. But you don't see advertising for all the other vaccines. But this one, they've really normalized it. And they hit it hard. I mean, like I hear about it constantly. It's on the radio. It's everywhere you go. You're hearing about the flu vaccine. And I always wonder if it's working, if people believe in it, you would have no need to advertise it. People would want it.
Right.
They would be standing in line to receive it. And you hear a lot of people say, oh, in third world countries, you're so lucky you have a chance to have vaccines. It's like, if it's working and it's safe, people will be there to get it. You won't need a law that forces your children to get it to enter school. You won't need a law forcing a nurse to get it in order to keep her job. You won't need laws that are forcing people to get them.
Right.
And it's almost like, because people don't have that confidence, and because pharmaceutical companies are not getting receiving the profit on the other end of what they're making, they are going to these extreme lengths, and it's okay somehow. I don't know. Like, again, it's normalized. It always feels a little weird for me to advertise something that's supposed to be so good for you.
Right. I'd like to touch on this one article that I thought was, just very interesting, that touches right on this and is really all about the marketing. It's from the British Medical Journal, 2013, by Peter Doshi. He was a postdoctoral fellow at Johns Hopkins. It's called "Influenza: Marketing Vaccine by Marketing Disease."
Ooh, interesting.
And the idea is that they're marketing the disease so that everyone's going to go out and get the vaccine. And basically it says the CDC pledges to base all public health decisions on the highest quality scientific data, openly and objectively derived. But this author argues that in the case of influenza vaccinations and their marketing, this is not so.
Saying that they are not open and honest with their information.
Objective. Yeah, they're not open and objective. I just want to read a few little tidbits. Let's see. Promotion of influenza vaccine is the most visible and aggressive public health policies today. 20 years ago, there were only 32 million doses. Today, around 135 million doses. This is in 2013.
Yeah.
So
now it's about
more.
150.
This enormous growth has not been fueled by popular demand, but instead by a public health campaign.
But also not by flu outbreaks that have gotten somehow worse.
You're right.
Not by a need.
Yeah, but here's the catcher. They say it's a health campaign that delivers a straightforward, quotes, "Who in their right mind could possibly disagree?"
Totally.
Message.
That's not just
You're
the flu
crazy
vaccine.
if you don't agree.
That's the whole vaccine program.
No, you're right. Influenza is a serious disease. We are all at risk of complications from influenza. The flu shot is virtually risk-free, and vaccination saves lives.
Okay, so
that's the media campaign.
Right. Say those again. This is not what is true, but what is pretended to be true so that people will take action.
Right. Influenza is a serious disease where it's not for almost everybody. We are all at risk of complications from influenza, and almost none of us are. The flu shot is virtually risk-free, and vaccination saves lives. You've been saying this on almost every podcast, that's the media, the media advice that they use.
But even this is saying it's a campaign.
It's a campaign.
This means that there were a group of people that sat around a big table one day and said, we're not selling enough doses of flu vaccine. What can we do to increase the doses? Well, we have to make influenza look scarier.
You have to sell the disease.
Yeah, the influenza needs to be scarier. The flu needs to be scarier.
And this is all the introductory paragraph, and the gist of it is the studies underlying the policy of the flu campaign are often of low quality and do not substantiate the officials' claims. The vaccine might be less beneficial and less safe than has been claimed, and the threat of influenza appears overstated. And they just say, again, they reiterate these sound bites. It's a fascinating article. I'm not going to read the whole thing. That was sort of basically the gist of it. Read the whole article. I gave you the title of it if you're interested in this. But again, this is the British Medical Journal. This is someone from Johns Hopkins. Peter Doshi went on to now he's the editor of the British Medical Journal. And the BMJ, they're part of a huge consortium of medical journals where they publish, 60 different medical journals. They're not a small group, and they are very vocally. They're not against the flu vaccine, they're in favor of objective science to evaluate whether or not it's really working as well as people claim, and they don't like to see people oversell it inappropriately.
I have to laugh because I feel like people always feel the need to say, "Oh, we're not anti-vaccine or not anti-flu vaccine." Right. You almost have to defend the fact that you just want to have objective information. The fact that you realize it's not exactly the honest truth that you're being told. I mean, I see this every time I see a news program with somebody on our side, in quotes, the informed consent side. You see people say, "I'm not anti-vaccine." It's like, you got to tell everybody, like a big disclaimer. By the way, I'm not anti-vaccine, just so you know. And I think that's so sad people have to say that. Like we have to somehow defend ourselves when all we want is safety and we want truthful information to be available to everyone. And what you're mentioning here and what we've already said is the media is skewing the data to, and I'd say the media is a messenger, basically. I don't think they're behind it all, obviously. But pharmaceutical companies, we know, are about 70% of the advertising for media, for major news networks. So they're trying to please their advertisers. Their advertisers want you to go buy their product just like any other advertiser would. They want you to buy their product. Their product happens to be a flu vaccine. The only reason you're going to get it is if you feel like the disease itself is risky enough. Right. And I think one of my biggest issues with this is there tends to be, and we know in other vaccines too, a lot of conflict of interest here. Mm-hmm. And one of the quotes that I found on here said, most of the experts who served on advisory panels in 2007 to evaluate vaccines for flu and cervical cancer had potential financial conflicts that were never resolved. These are the experts, and they're on the advisory panel. This is who tells you this is what you need to get. This is who you're supposed to be trusting as independent and objective and third party, because it's not your doctor, it's not legislators. This is the advisory committee, advisory panels. And even those people are the ones that have these conflicts of interest, especially for the flu vaccine and HPV or cervical cancer. And that's so concerning because both of those two happen to be the ones that have really high side effects that don't actually work that well. And there's a lot of controversy about both of those. Controversy connected with conflicts of interest. I find that interesting.
Yeah. And, along the lines of conflicts of interest, and I'm trying to find where I wrote down about this law, but there's a law that was never passed that I never even knew about, probably because it didn't pass. It was a law in 2005 when the flu vaccine was really ramping up. There was actually a federal bill put in front of Congress that basically created a PR machine kind of connection between the vaccine manufacturers and the CDC and the federal government that basically said it told the vaccine manufacturers, if you start making a whole bunch of flu vaccines, we promise to do a bunch of PR for it. We promise to buy, tens of millions of doses from you. If you make too many and they don't sell, then us as the government will buy those from you. We'll take those off your hands so that you don't lose money. And we will this is part of a bill. We will actually launch PR campaigns that paint the flu as serious and deadly, and we will work on scaring the public into everyone getting the flu shot.
Yeah.
So this was a bill that got put into Congress in 2005. It didn't go anywhere, which honestly surprises me. It kind of makes me get a little.
Well, that was 2005. You said.
Right.
It's a different climate now.
Right. I mean, but it maybe gives me a little bit of faith in that enough of our legislators in the federal government were not willing to buy into that. But all the PR we're seeing now, they're doing exactly everything that bill says. Yeah. And I'm going to bring this up in another episode.
But that means that they were doing it then too.
Right. So they started doing it then. They just didn't pass that law
right, but they're still
to make
behind
the government
the scenes.
Financially part of it. But they're doing this whole program anyway. I'm going to find the law. I think you'll be fascinated by it, you are by most things I bring to the table. Right.
One thing I want to say too is because you guys have the ability to interact with us on our Facebook page and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Once you hear this, I'm curious to see. What are your thoughts on the flu vaccine? Do you feel the intentions are good? Do you think advertising a vaccine is unethical? I would love for people to weigh in with that on our Facebook page and see, is it unethical to have such a strong and aggressive PR campaign and advertising campaign for something that's supposed to be a public health interest? like the flu vaccine. I would love to hear what you guys think about that.
I think we're out of time. I have so many more articles to show you, but no, some of these fall under a different category. I think we'll pick up this conversation.
We'll be lucky enough to see them again, I'm sure.
Oh, yes, you will. I guarantee it.
Make sure to rate and review our podcast and check out our website and, again, our Facebook page, Immunity Education Group. Facebook and immunityeducationgroup.org for our website, for our nonprofit. And hopefully we covered some interesting topics. Still, weigh in. I want to see what you guys say about this. And
I want to, I guess, give a little teaser about what's coming up. One of my greatest passions is reaching and talking to new parents with new little babies who just want information so they can make an educated choice. And I think we've given you one podcast so far to that target audience.
The vaccine schedule.
Yeah, the vaccine schedule. I promise, if Melissa will let me, I want to give you basically an overview of infant diseases that are targeted by these vaccines. And what is your baby's risk? What is a new parent do you need to be aware of when it comes to these diseases? Which ones really are at risk? Which ones are not a risk to your baby? I want to give you like an idea as you're sitting there sweating over the idea, should I vaccinate now before it's too late? Or can I wait? Can I, I need time to understand this. I'm going to walk you through those diseases just so you as a new parent understand the vaccine decision and how it relates to what your baby is really at risk at. So again, you can be educated. So that's kind of one of my passions coming up. Melissa, what's on your mind?
I was going to say some of the things that I want to talk about, and we have so many things that I find really interesting. We're going to talk more about conflicts of interest, which I think is really important, and that's going to be its own.
So much more to say about that.
Oh yeah, it's an important thing in its own episode. I want to talk a lot about. I also want to talk about the trust in the pharmaceutical companies. What do we as a public, do we trust pharmaceutical companies? I want to talk about the 1986 ruling. We're definitely going to go into that, which has a lot in there. I want to talk about how we relate to other industrialized nations in the world, and as far as our vaccine schedule, and how our viewpoints on that.
Are you looking at me as if you want me to research that and bring that to the table, or are you going to find those
already
numbers?
Did it. Thank you.
Good. Thank God.
See, this
I have so
is
much to do.
This is what I mean by the I'm a doctor thing. Is he just assumes like he's the only one that can research.
Well, you were looking at me like,
no.
Okay, Bob, that's your assignment.
No, not at all. Excellent. I'll let you know.
Okay.
And then what else? I just want to see. One of the other things I'm really interested in that I can't wait to talk about is just why people who question things are considered crazy or conspiracy theorists. Why do you have to be crazy to want objective information? And I have some screenshots of some things I've seen in groups with other parents, and it is wow. I mean, just some of the things that are said by those who believe in mandates. I mean, it's so hateful, so derogatory. Like, I am shocked by some of the things I see. But I want to have a whole episode talking about those, because I find that's what people see on a regular basis, and it is just crazy how polarizing these camps are, and why it wasn't even like that a decade ago. What's changed that has made this that way? So I want to talk about that.
And
too.
my rebuttal to that is, how can you not want to know every detail about something so complicated like that's like the 69 doses of vaccination that are going to go into your child? How can you not know? To me, it's almost would be crazy to accept that at face value without a single bit of informed consent. And anyway, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, and I have like other pages. I won't read them all to you, but other pages of ideas.
Melissa has 70 ideas.
One for each dose on the schedule. But no, I mean,
I have like 10 ideas.
There are so many things I want to talk about that are just parent to parent.
And we'll do it all. We'll do it all. This is the vaccine conversation. As you can tell, Melissa and I love talking about this. We spent the last 3 years having these conversations just between us, like sitting at Starbucks as we're trying to write out, blogs. And now we've decided, why don't we just sit here at a table and talk about it live, and you can hear us.
Well, actually, Dr. Bob decided that this is really his idea. Yeah. I'm not, I never listened to podcasts before, but I appreciate this as a new
way more
venue.
Fun. Right.
It is. And we look forward to you guys being a part of it with us, because this is a conversation between us and you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
On the vaccine conversation.
Again with the voice, right?
That wasn't me. That wasn't me.
Okay, you guys can dance. Dance for the next 30 seconds. I love this song.
We're gonna be the peace we wanna see.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare professional for information on vaccines and infectious diseases.